Welcome back everyone. So, today it's going to be quite a trip. The Cyberpunk fallout is honestly more than I expected. The stock of CD Projekt Group has plummeted, but before the headlines get to you, I do actually have to explain what that really means. And there sure does seem to be a bit of a fan revolt over at the sub. They're being meta-bombed as well, and yes, they're being called out for, well, essentially pulling something more egregious than the Watchdogs downgrade, which is a bit rough. Now, they have taken some responsibility though, but that's revealed a weird, funky, gamified internal bonus structure. But there is some good news, because yes, some of that responsibility is good, and also patch 1.0.4 has been deployed, and it makes things a bit better. And yes, this is a video covering a lot of negative-ish topics. It absolutely is. I should actually note, I do like the game quite a bit. I have been enjoying it quite a bit, but guess what? That's absolutely no excuse. So let's start. Their stock is down 29% since its pre-launch highs. Why is this? I mean, especially since they announced the recoupment of all of their development costs and internal marketing spend within 1 day of release. Right? You might be looking at this and thinking, oh wow, the game's underperformed, it's all done terribly. No. There has to be some explanation here. I have a little bit of experience doing stocks, that's how I personally save, and I do a lot of research, so I'm going to try to pass some of that on. Number one, I would say their image and some of that infallibility has been shattered. One thing to understand is that stocks are purchased based on the expected value of future returns, right? Now, expected Cyberpunk revenue is something that will have been priced into their stock value, honestly, a long-ass time ago, right? I think that the all-time highs that we saw for the company were based off their expected future returns of follow-up projects, right? Them doing more things. I mean, certainly their price-to-earnings ratio, a bit different to Activision Blizzard. Paints a different picture, but I won't get into that nerdy stuff. Now, the rocky release of Cyberpunk 2077 is sure to erode investor confidence, right? That, plus another factor that catches out many stocks, and then many newbie stock people don't understand, and is the good old adage of, buy the rumor, sell the news. It's a pretty simple concept. You ride the speculative wave up, and then you escape. You sell out before news, right? Because what does news do? It kind of collapses the probability function of where the stock is going to go to some form of projection based off actual concrete data. So, here's an example. Think of people who purchased Tesla stock during the hype for Battery Day, during the hype period. And then they sold that just before Battery Day happened, because they knew that Battery Day would announce things, and that yes, buy the rumor, sell the news, would actually happen. And it did. Certainly, the headline is rough here, yes, but hopefully this segment has actually helped explain things. Yes, obviously, the game coming out and being a bit busted will rattle faith of investors, right? And it will probably mean the game will not perform as well as it had off, so that will cause a regular stock dip. However, buy the rumor, sell the news, and actually understanding what a stock's value really is in terms of future returns, I hope that will explain how to process this. Now, speaking of finances, you can help out ours and get the Death Knight pin and the lovely Elfie art bundle with a sticker over on Patreon. Yep, that plus a whole bunch of other stuff behind the news, or behind the scenes, daily briefing, all of that. And yeah, one day I'll get these as slick as lttstore.com, but maybe not today. Okay, let's roll. This is likely the most damning section of the video, so hit up Digital Foundry's console impressions. They are rough. Regularly, the game is in the teens in terms of FPS, often the low 20s, and very rarely a solid 30, and that's all well sub 1080p. Yes, these are old consoles, and I think poor performance is to be expected. However, that's a bit of a pointless point to make, because what you have to do is compare it to releases by other studios, and you will find that Cyberpunk 2077 looks significantly worse and performs significantly worse than other major multi-platform releases by other studios, and saying they are but a small indie company is not really an excuse given their size. Unfortunately for CD Projekt Red and the corporate defense force that seemingly has spawned up around them, they dug themselves a grave that they simply cannot escape here. Now, is Cyberpunk 2077 a next-gen game? Said the interviewer. I've heard a number of people say that. The current console generation is what we're aiming for. We are aiming for Xbox One, PS4, and PC, says CD Projekt Red. In 2018. There's one, right? Here's another. Is it a challenge to optimize for low-end hardware? Asked WCCF Tech. Actually, no. We have a very custom engine, said CD Projekt Red. Yeah, interesting. So they said it wasn't hard. They then went on to say, the graphics are quite amazing for what you're going to get on consoles and low-end PCs. This was in 2018. This is when there were trailers for the game out, and when the game, this is around when the pre-orders were actually kicking off. That's not good. They continually promised amazing graphics, even on the 2013 consoles. Marketing trailers went out, and the game did not look or perform like those trailers. And yes, they had their disclaimers, but here's the thing, and this is even worse because this proves intent. CD Projekt Red actively engaged in an information suppression campaign against their own customers. This is absolute top-tier scumbag behavior. Reviewers were not even given console review copies whatsoever. Reviewer-captured video could not be shown until after launch. If a company is trying to deny you, the consumer, information, then obviously there's some malintent going on. It's not just spoilers. The spoilers thing is what we call an excuse. An excuse to screw you over and rip you off. And it's obvious that's what they've done. I think we can all agree that the visual and performance difference displayed here is worse than Ubisoft's infamous downgrades. We cannot give CD Projekt Red special treatment just because we like them. Because they're a bit edgy and that's fun. We can't do that. It's as simple as that. They engaged in greed-driven behavior against their own customers. They did stuff that is just as bad as what EA and the whole rest of them do, right? When given an adoring, loving audience, they chose to abuse that trust. They knew they were releasing this game in the state that they released it in. That simply is the fact of the situation. They knew what that was like before they hit the live button. I'm not even sure the likes of EA, Activision, or Ubisoft would have had the gall to release the console version of this game. And I'm saying that as somebody who still remembers his Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda Day 1 experience. This is a fall from grace that is sad to see, but it's one that we cannot smooth over, that we cannot run away from. We have to acknowledge what they actually did. Alright, next up, CD Projekt Red have actually responded to things. First up, patch 1.0.4 fixes a number of issues with the game, including a fix of the seizure-inducing brain dance effect. It also, and this is good news, does smooth out console performance. It's still really bad though, and it still looks really, really bad, but early reports are saying that they're living in the low 20s in terms of frame rate a lot more, and that those reports indicating the dips to like 15 frames per second, that stuff isn't really happening. So it seems like the very, very, very worst situations, they have found some way to get around those. They've also responded to their employees and, because of leaks, the public. Because yes, we now know this, because, stuff was leaked to Bloomberg. Staff bonuses were initially tied to the game's Metacritic score, and that is something that obviously would have ended up punishing staff for the failure of their leaders, even when the game still would do excellently from a financial perspective. Well, the good news here is that in an email, Adam Badowski admitted that they underestimated what was needed to deliver this project and that they are changing the bonus system. Now, we should note that this is not their regular profit share that they do anyway. This is a strange token-based extra work system kind of thing. Essentially, right, team leaders can hand out these tokens monthly to people on their team who they feel have really risen to the occasion. Now, it's not literally just tokens for crunching, but I think in practice it probably is that. And I would worry that this is maybe not the best way to run a company, and I would say that the work culture of Japan, which is notoriously on a per capita basis actually not that productive because of their work culture, where really being seen to be working is often more important than actually working, it might twig us onto that. But anyway, and actually, hey, I mean, this game has been in development for quite a long time, and it didn't come out in a great state, even with all that crunching. So maybe it didn't actually work that well. Anyway, work hard, be seen to be working hard, and you will get a token. The more tokens you get, the larger your sort of extra performance bonus is. Now, stuff like this would, most companies be just done in a quarterly sort of performance review, but I guess CDPR kind of thought that gamifying the system, giving people these tokens with a company name on them, or, sort of logo on them, would work better. And I mean, I could totally see how that worked with people's psychology, though I think that might be a controversial way to run things. Anyway, those who did get the tokens will now get their full bonuses, even if the game slips up on Metacritic. Look, it's certainly good to see that CD Projekt Red admit that they underestimated things and fix up their bonus structure so that staff are not messed around. And, I mean, hey, if the delays didn't inform that they underestimated things, then you know what? I think the subreddit sure as hell will. Obviously, subreddits are extremely circle-jerky things, and they should always be thought of with a bunch of caution, right? I mean, with, say, Destiny 2, right? You'll have these situations where a lot of people think, oh, the subreddit, that's just where all the whining goes on, and they'll still play Destiny 2, kind of blind to all those things. Well, a lot of that will still happen with this game, but I think the scale of the upset over there is actually noteworthy, and I think it could be perhaps a leading indicator of what general audiences will feel and how aspects of this game will actually be remembered. Now, overall, it's too much to get into, but going beyond the bugs and the performance, there's actually a lot of criticism being leveled at the actual game. It was actually surprising for me how much was there. Many are comparing it very negatively to the open worlds of Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption, and I think that's fair enough if you look at the game that way. Night City is very much not an immersive sim, and while it doesn't have sim-like open world elements, and really the non-plot NPCs, they're well below a lot of other games, and it doesn't really have some of the, the side activities that people would like in games like GTA. Now, personally, I'll say this. I did notice this. I also didn't mind it because I'm engaging with this game a lot more similarly to how I would play a game like Deus Ex Human Revolution. So it is in line with my expectations what Night City is like, and I'm having a good time playing the game on a 2060 Super, but perhaps CD Projekt Red went a little bit too hard in their open world marketing to the point where they set expectations that they were not able to meet. I mean, certainly there is a bit that people are really linking a lot in the 48-minute gameplay trailer where, yeah, the voiceover that CD Projekt Red used, the actual text, what's spoken there, really doesn't line up with how the game actually shipped. And I mean, yeah, that sort of is deceptive marketing, isn't it?
We've greatly enhanced our crowd and community systems to create the most believable city in any open world game to date.
Une nouvelle, et puis bah voilà, là sur une rue très très fréquentée.
Beyond that, though, people are also calling out things like the weak as hell character creator, the lack of an ability to change things like hair after creation, and a lot of criticism on aspects of combat and also on basically the game as an RPG. And certainly I've always agreed with that with CD Projekt Red games. I thought they've generally actually been okay combat, really not that good RPGs, but characters, setting, and story that I deeply enjoy going through, like with Witcher 3. Take a gander yourself, it sure is a rabbit hole. Somebody even noticed, I thought this was neat, that there are like no non-scripted car chases in the game ever. And then after messing around, they deduced that it's basically because the driving AI is extremely simplistic, and then sort of thought, well, maybe that's why the police actually just spawn in and get you. You don't have those big, cool Grand Theft Auto-like car chases with the police because, yeah, they spawn in and get you. So overall, I would say this is high expectations hitting the realities of a game that, during development, probably had to have its scope be utterly murdered. To be honest with you, I've got to imagine that wall running is likely but one of many. One thing that I thought was interesting was the user-critic divide here. So critics gave this game an average of 90-ish. Users, well, they've given it a 6.1 on PC, 2.3 on Xbox One, and 1.9 in PS4. Ouch, but it's Metacritic. And we all know that Metacritic is basically just the default dumping ground, and it's got things like, zero purchase validation. So let's do one that does have purchase validation. Steam. It has a 78 overall. Now, I should note that Steam does not work in the same way that, say, Metacritic works, where in Metacritic, people actually, the score is based on a self-reported score. On Steam, it's just thumbs up, thumbs down. So it'll be like that situation where a movie could have like 95 in Rotten Tomatoes, but, 60 in Metacritic. Because Metacritic is more about what's actually thought, whereas Rotten Tomatoes is actually more about general positive sentiment or general negative sentiment. What's funny about the 78 in Steam, though, is that, turns out James Davenport of PC Gamer did pretty damn well with his review, which was a 78. But yes, it's an interesting situation, this critic and user divide. I would really love to see what it's truly like on the consoles, though. because of course you can't really get good data from the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store. Maybe you could argue then that those people being a bit disenfranchised by their own native platform in terms of reviews are actually just going to Metacritic to sort of dump a review there. Overall, an interesting situation. I'd be keen to see what you think about this game overall, like even just sans bugs and stuff, where you're lying with it. Certainly for me, it's a limited game that I'm enjoying in a pretty specific way, which is really in a first-person RPG way, sort of like how I enjoyed Deus Ex Human Revolution, and not really going into it wanting a big open-world experience. So for me, I think I'm probably going to be at that sort of higher end of my experience, lining up a bit more with what the game is actually shipping, versus some of the people who had those, inflated expectations. And in fairness, some of those were inflated by the company themselves. So, what's the TLDR? Well, great staff, terrible management, simple as that. That's what it's like with CDPR. They made promises that they simply could not keep, both to their audience and their staff, and they knew that was an audience that would lap up their every utterance, and they sold pre-orders based on that. CD Projekt Red were one of the good ones. They are now acting like any other big games company. It is going to take a lot of self-flagellation, explaining, and action from management. And it is as simple as that. You cannot mislead your customers. You cannot manipulate reviews like that and expect to be left off the hook. We cannot do it. Many love CD Projekt Red, right? And many love it who also rail against the big publishers. They're the first to click whenever EA does something wrong or Activision Blizzard does something wrong. Fair enough. When they do things wrong, we should pay attention and actually know what's going on in the industry. But for those people, now is the test. Were you doing that because it felt good? Or were you doing that because you have principles? If you have principles, well, I don't think you're going to be okay with the current situation. If you're still running Corporate Defense Force, I don't really know. There's not much to respect there. And with that, I take my leave. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.